The Or Sameach also has an unbelievable commentary on the Torah called the Meshech Chochmah. And there he writes in Parshat Bechukotai that the Jews go to exile. Tragedy. What are we doing here? How can we sing the song of God in Babylon, right? In the rivers of Babylon. But then the next generation, they get used to it. They build up Torah centers, studying, keeping the mitzvot, having mikvahs and kosher food and kosher pizza, kosher delis. And then they say, what are we missing here? The next generation says, you're not allowed to come back. You have to wait for the Mashiach. You don't even... And then he says that when you think that Berlin is Jerusalem, that's the example he gave. He passed away in 1930s, early 30s. But when you think that Berlin is the new Jerusalem, we have a new Jerusalem, then will come a hurricane, these winds that will remind you and uproot you and remind that this isn't your home. Like it says in Yechezkel chapter 20, verse 33, 34, the commentaries explain. He says, with fury poured out and an outstretched arm, I will take you out of the exile. And the commentary, what do you mean? Some hand will come out of heaven? The commentaries explain there, Mitzudot Davin, that God will put the hate in the hearts of the nations and they will remind you that this isn't your home. If you forget, like you're leaving no other option, so to speak. God has many options and ways. Hopefully we'll remind you here the different way. If they tried to wake them up and the communities outside, maybe we have to go to Muncie or different places and give this message. Now you can do it through the internet, but to communicate and recognize the beauty, the significance, the centrality, but blessing comes to them and to the world by our presence here. But he says that when you forget, then as if the sick person doesn't even realize he's sick. He doesn't go to the doctor anymore because he thinks he's fine. Then it's a tragic situation. Then it needs a more stronger awakening. And then it says there in the commentary, in the Yechezkel 20 there, that I'll put the hate in the hearts of the nations and they will remind you. So the Or Sameach, the Meshech Chochmah, the Parshat Bechukotai, that when you think that Berlin is the new Jerusalem, you'll get the wake-up call from elsewhere. Maybe we'll have time to see the Yaakov Emden also, that all of the suffering and all the persecution, he said in Spain and all the other places, being found in New Jerusalem. We're sitting here, the golden age in Spain, the Jewish community growing and blossoming. Well, we have everything. What do we need outside of Spain here? And he says, when you think you have a New Jerusalem, then he says all the tragedies stem from that, which is connected to this week's parasha that I mentioned, that recaps the sin of the spies, that Ma'asu Be'eretz Chemda, that despise the cherished land. They have a new home. Like the spies that didn't, why go to Eretz Yisrael? We have it great here. The man from heaven, learning Torah face to face with the divine, the presence and the miracles and the connection to God. In Eretz Yisrael, you'll have to work the land, and he says there we have bread from heaven. In Eretz Yisrael, you have to bring bread from the earth. It's more difficult than it may because of the more physical activities, and you might forget the divine source. You might think that your hand is doing it, your activities, and indeed we fell. It wasn't so perfect right away when we came to Eretz Yisrael. And nevertheless, that caused the 40 years running around in the desert, and those people, that generation, would not enter the land. When did that take place? When did they come back with that message? The spies that came back and said, no, we don't have to go, and the Jews cried, and we don't want to go to Eretz Yisrael. That was on Tisha B'Av, the Gemara in Tanit 29. That was Tisha B'Av. They were sent the 29th of Sivan, 40 days later, Tisha, the 9th of Av, and God says in the Gemara there, in Tanit, that you cried, he says, B'chiat, how do you say, B'chiat Chinam, you cried for nothing. Here I'm giving you the biggest gift of creation, to link up mankind, reality to this, call it infinite source of life, of divinity, of goodness, of holiness that permeates the world. That I'm giving this gift and you cry, I'll give you a reason to cry. This will cross a B'chiat Dorot, it says. This will be a date of crying for generations. The first temple destroyed, the second temple destroyed, the Beit Tar was ruined, it's destroyed, killed, all those thousands. World War I began on, I think, other tragedies. World War I think, began on Tisha B'Av. This is a day of tragedy, all because of what? Because of the refusal of the Jews to come to Eretz Yisrael.